Alright guys, here is the follow-up video to our live stream yesterday. For some reason it seems like on the live streams my iPad is losing connection like crazy, and that's what it's allowing me to pull up the whiteboard and interact and show you notes and things like that. So I'm either A, going to figure that out before next week, or B, we'll just kind of cut out the live streams and it'll just be the videos here, and I'll figure out another way that you can interact with those. Because it's not like a live stream. You're not real-time interacting and asking questions as we're going through notes, but if it's not going to work functionally and it's going to waste a lot of time, then I'll just do the videos themselves, post those, and figure out a way for you to get engaged in those. So where we left off yesterday was, I think we were on example number 11. We have a few that we had questions on, and we'll kind of jump right into those, and then hopefully it'll clarify up kind of the last little bit of this section. You can get those problems finished, ask any questions, and then we will talk about the quiz at the end. Okay, so let's jump over to here. So the one we left off on was number 11. So number 11 in your book, which is the Check Your Understanding on page 296, is asking you to suppose that theta is an angle in standard position whose terminal side lies in the given quadrant. For each function, find the value of the remaining 5 trig functions. So you have to use the information given to kind of get an idea of what this problem is asking. So for number 11, the information it gives you is that the tangent of theta equals -1. All right, so one thing I want to make sure we recognize is, like we talked about yesterday, tangent of theta within a unit circle is always represented by y over x. So like we talked about yesterday, I'm not going to go through like in as much detail, but since that is -1, then that means y or x, one of those values have to be negative. So it either has to be a -x and a positive y, or a positive x and a negative y. Well, you know which one it is because it tells you in the problem that, hey, tangent of theta is -1, and the terminal side of the angle is in quadrant number 4. Okay, that's the information it gives you in the problem. So that's enough information to start to actually draw that out and understand where it's at. So if we draw our graph, like we said, we know our terminal side is always going to be, let me actually put the unit circle on here. So let's imagine that's the unit circle, and then we have our initial side here. So that's the initial side of our angle on the positive x-axis. Now we need that terminal side, which we know is in quadrant 4, and we know it results in a tangent value that is -1. So that's when we go over here back to the chart that we were looking at a few different times yesterday and think about, okay, when are we going to get a tangent value of 1? So we look at our third column here on this chart, and tangent of theta is 1 when we're looking at a 45-degree angle. So you know that if we go back over here, that angle that we're going to be dealing with is 45 degrees. We also know the terminal side is in quadrant 4. So it's going to be here where we open it up, and theta here is 45 degrees. Then here's where it intersects the outside of the unit circle, and we are going to create our right triangle. Okay, so that's kind of the whole visualization of what this problem is asking. Then we're looking at, well, we know the hypotenuse is 1 here, and then if we're finding tangent of theta, we're doing y, which is here, over x, which is there. So we know that the cosine of theta is equal to your x value, and then your sine of theta is equal to your y value. So then it's just a matter of understanding that what is going to be x and what is going to be y, because what it's asking you to do is to find the other 5. So it's giving you tangent of theta. It wants you to find cosine, sine, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So it's wanting you to find the other 5. So we need that x and y value. So again, we're going to jump over here to this chart here. And we're going to look and say, okay, at 45 degrees, both sine and cosine are radical 2 over 2. They're the same thing. All right? So, and again, that chart is on page 287. That's something you're going to be able to use on your quiz to get those values. So if we know that both sine and cosine are radical 2 over 2, I'm just going to fill those in. That x right here is going to be radical 2 over 2. That value is going to be positive because it's to the right of our origin. But then we look at our y value. This y value is going to be radical 2 over 2, but it's going to be negative because that y value is negative in quadrant 4. So there's our first 2, because in order to find the other 2, we need to find sine of theta, which we said was the y value. So it's actually negative radical 2 over 2. Then we need to find cosine of theta, which is positive radical 2 over 2. So now what we have is we have tangent, which it gives us. Then we have sine and we have cosine. All right? Well, now what I want you to be able to do for the other 3, instead of just looking at a chart and writing those down too, is understand how you're getting those from the sine, cosine, and tangent values. So I'm not going to reference the chart for cosecant, secant, and cotangent here. I'm going to try to get those 3 just by looking at the values we have. Okay? So let's start out with cosecant. By definition, we know cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. All right? So all I'm going to do is flip my sine value. So sine is negative radical 2 over 2. So it's going to be negative 2 over radical 2. But again, we don't want a radical in our denominator. So we want to rationalize our denominator by multiplying it by radical 2 over radical 2. Because again, radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. So when we simplify that, we know that's going to give us a denominator of 2. And then in the top, we just have 2 radical 2. So, just kind of write it down here to have a little more room. Cosecant of theta is 2 radical 2 over 2. And it's still going to be a negative because if we take the reciprocal, it's not going to change the actual type of number that it is, a positive or negative. So cosecant is 2 radical 2 over 2. Then we have, and on a quiz, if I wanted you to actually do that, I would make you show that versus just looking at the chart and getting that value. So then we want to find secant, which is basically going to be the same exact thing. Since cosine and sine are the same numerically, they have a different sign, but the number themselves is the same, it's going to end up in the same thing except positive. So that one, it would just be a waste of time to try to go through and show that again, because it's not going to make sense to do that because it's just going to be positive 2 radical 2 over 2. And then tangent, if it's negative 1, and it's negative 1 because it's y over x, which is radical 2 over 2 over radical 2 over 2, and one of those are negative. If you take the reciprocal of that, it's still going to be 1, and one of those are still going to be negative. So cotangent's not going to change. It's still going to be negative 1. Okay? So that's just kind of knowing different number properties. That's going to help you there as well. Just basic concept of why that's negative 1. And if y over x is negative 1 and I flip it to make it x over y, it's still going to be negative 1. Okay? It's not going to change that. So those are your other 5 trig functions there. Okay? So that's kind of how you're looking at for number 11. So anyone like that, you just have to find where it's going to be at, what that reference angle is, meaning the angle between that and the x-axis, and use your chart to find your 3 main functions, sine, cosine, and tangent, and then take the reciprocals of those to get your other three. All right. So I think the other question we had was on number 23. And I think somebody commented was asking about when to use reference angles yesterday as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. So reference angles are the distance from the terminal side of an angle to the x-axis. Okay, that's essentially what it is in the graph. Where your terminal side is, however many degrees from that terminal side to the x-axis is your reference angle. Well, actually on number 7, that's when you needed to use your reference angles, but number 7 was just 30 degrees. So we really didn't need it because 30 is your reference angle. So when you look at check your understanding number 8. Okay, we didn't do that one yesterday. Check your understanding on page 296 in your book, number 8. What it's saying is use the unit circle to find all the values of the trig functions, okay? All 6 trig functions. Well, the angle in question is 225 degrees. So the first thing we have to be able to do is draw that out. So we have this. We have our unit circle here. Now we're going to start to draw our angle. So we know everybody's starting here, initial side there. Then we start to open it up. Okay, well if it's 225 degrees, it's going to be 90 to get to the positive y, 180 to get to the opposite side, which is the negative x. Then we need 45 more. So 225 is going to be about right there. So that is from the initial side, 90 to there, 180 to there, and then 225 getting to right there. Okay? Well, if we think at this checkpoint, this is 180, well, how much more do we need to get to that terminal side to get to 225? And that is 45. So what that means is the reference angle for this angle is this value right here, which we said was 45 degrees. Okay? So now we create our right triangle using this terminal side to the x-axis. Now this is the triangle that we're going to find our 6 trig functions on. So this is the one, for those that were asking, that we use that reference angle. We're not using the original angle of 225 degrees because, again, on number 8, all it gives you is 225 degrees. That's all the problem gives you. And it's saying find all 6 trig functions using the unit circle for that angle. Well, you have to find the reference angle, meaning the terminal side to the x-axis, and then you use that reference angle to go to your chart and find sine, cosine, tangent, and so forth and so forth. The biggest thing is you have to notice what quadrant your terminal side is in. Since this terminal side is in quadrant 3, then you know that when you look up those values in the chart, that it's negative x, negative y. So both of those values are going to be negative. So like cosine of theta equals x, well now it's going to be negative x because it's in quadrant 3. Sine of theta equals y, now it's going to be negative y because it's in quadrant 3. Tangent of theta is y over x, but it's in quadrant 4, so both of those are going to be negative, so it's actually tangent is going to be positive. So things like that you have to think about. Then the problem we just looked at told us what those values are, right? It told us that when we find sine of 45 degrees, so we're looking at sine of theta, the reference angle is 45 degrees, so it's radical 2 over 2, but it's negative. Then you'd say, okay, well, cosine of theta is your x value, but it's in quadrant 3, so it is negative. So it's the same thing. And then your tangent is just y over x, which is negative radical 2 over negative radical 2 over 2. Anything over itself is just positive 1. Then we could go and do the reciprocal thing again to find the other three, and we follow that same thought process. So this goes into the question that we had, and this will be the last one we talk about on this video, is number 23. And this is one we specifically had a question on the live stream yesterday. So 23 gives us 150 degrees, and it's asking us to find those trig functions. Okay, so again, we have to be able to understand what that's going to look like in the context of the graph, where the terminal side is going to fall and what that reference angle is going to be. So if I'm doing a 150 degree angle and I think about my unit circle, and I start my initial side over here where we always do, and then I go 150 degrees around. Well, I know it's going to hit 90 at the positive y, and then it's going to need some more to get over here. Okay? So, like we said, this is 90 to there, and then 90 more would be the other one, but we don't need 90 more because that'd be 180, so we're only going there. So we're actually going 60 more past that. So that opened up here is 150 degrees. But what we need in order to solve this problem is the reference angle, which is going to be the angle that is formed from the terminal side to the x-axis. So this time we're kind of moving down. So if we're moving a full 150, then we know in order to get to that x-axis, it's a full 180, so it's just 30 more. So this time that reference angle that we're going to use for theta is 30. And then we're just going to repeat the process. We're going to say, okay, first thing I need to find is sine of theta. Okay, if we go to our chart, then we know that sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Okay, so you see that on the chart right there. First column, first row. Sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Cosine of 30 degrees is radical 3/2. And tangent of 30 degrees is radical 3/3. And all this is in reference to our unit circle. So then the only other thing we would need to note is that when we look over here at our graph, that terminal side is in quadrant 2, which is negative x, positive y. So that means since sine of theta equals y, for this one it's going to stay positive. But cosine of theta, since it equals x, it's going to be negative because in quadrant 2 we have a negative x and a positive y. So just remembering things like that and relating that to the unit circle and making sure you use the reference angle on these. So you have to be able to visualize where these angles, where their terminal sides are going to end up, and then take that terminal side to the x, and that's your reference angle that you're going to use to reference the chart and to get those values of sine, cosine, tangent, and then use those values to get secant, cosecant, and cotangent. All right, so hopefully that clarifies up most of the questions from that assignment. So today you are just to get that assignment completed. Over the next couple of days. You don't have to have it done today. And try to submit that to me by Monday or Tuesday. I am going to start getting grades in this weekend. I know I've said that for a couple of days, but I am going to start to get those in. I know a lot of people have submitted through Google Classroom. That's awesome. A lot of people have emailed me. That's fine too. You can either snap a picture and email it, snap a picture, upload it to Google Classroom for the assignment that it is. I don't care. As long as I get it, you're good. So if you haven't submitted anything yet, make sure you get that in to me as soon as you can. Like we said, quiz on Monday. If you have questions, I will probably open up something on Google Classroom for you to ask questions this weekend. If you're looking over your stuff and you see that you have a couple issues with a couple types of problems, but basically it's just 5.1 through 5.3. 5.1 introduced the whole concept of terminal side, initial side, quadrantal angles, reference angles, things like that. Just the foundational definition stuff. Then section 2 was just your basic trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So just making sure you understand where those are coming from, the reciprocal relationship between those, and just understand how to find those. And then the last stuff that this video is on, which is your unit circle stuff, and using the unit circle to actually find those trig functions, using the whole concept of understanding angles and terminal sides and reference angles and starting to kind of try to pull that together a little bit to actually solve problems. So hopefully the video clarified some things that you need. If it didn't, let me know what questions that you still have, and I will definitely do my best to either answer that through an email or maybe make another short video over one specific problem if multiple people are having issues with it. But either way, let me know if you have issues, problems, stuff you need help on. I'm available today through the weekend. I mean, I ain't going anywhere. I ain't getting a corona. So just let me know. I'll definitely follow up with you if you have any issues. So that's it. See you guys.